How you guys doing today? We're doing something a little bit different today. As you can see, I've zoomed you all the way in here. What I wanted to do today is I wanted to do a little bit of a, not so much tutorial, more of a how I draw type of video, because I don't really want these to be taken as tutorials, like an end all be all. This is just how I do it, and maybe you'll find that this video helps you in your art journey a little bit. So for today's how I draw video, I wanted to start off with the thing that everybody starts off drawing, which is eyes. Everyone always does the like pretty little eye in the corner of the paper. The anime eye is the first thing that people really put a lot of detail into. So I want to show you today how I draw eyes for my characters. So I always start off with a blue line first. I'm just going to draw a little head real quick so that we have a place to actually put the eye. I always start off with a blue line for my sketches because I find it makes it a lot easier to distinguish the sketch from the line art when I'm going in and lining a piece. We're just drawing a simple guy here. So for the eye, what I like to start out with, my eyes are a little bit anime styled. So I do kind of this almond shape. It's a very peculiar shape. There's not anything really like it, but it's a little bit almond, a little bit round, and this is kind of my baseline for eyes. This is how I start out. You can also do them a little bit rounder by bringing the bottom down and the top lid, or you can make them a little more almond shaped, a little narrower. You can point them up on the end instead of going straight. Something I really like to do for my characters is a downturned eye. So just bringing the bottom lid down a bit and the top lid to follow, something like that. But for today, we're just gonna stick with the basic shape that I usually draw. Now we're gonna go really simple today just to get the basics down. So typically for eyes, what I do is I draw the iris first, which is of course the circular part of the eye, the colored part. And I wanna say most people's eyes, like mine, are going to be touching the top and the bottom lid. So we're gonna bring this iris all the way down to touch that bottom lid and bring it all the way back up. And with eyes, I kind of like to make the top of the iris flatter than the rest of it because it kind of shows that it's disappearing behind the lid. Now the pupil for me, this is something I picked up from another artist years and years and years ago. I don't even remember who the artist was, but I remember seeing this art style and absolutely loving it. So anatomically, the way our eyes are built is from the outside of the iris to the pupil is a little bit of a cone shape. So if you were looking at an eyeball like so, this is from the side, the iris would be here and it would create a little bit, definitely a lot more subtle than this, but I'm just doing it extreme for visualization purposes. And then the pupil of the eye would be at the back of this cone. And there's the lens on top of the eye, and there's a whole bunch of stuff back here, but we don't really need to get into that. The only part that I really like to draw is the pupil seemingly in a cone shape. So instead of putting the pupil directly in the center, because this eye is at a 3/4 view, I will actually offset it a little bit to the side. So that way it looks like the pupil is inside this cone, inside the eye. And I like to do really, really small pupils generally, leave a lot of space for the colors of the eye. But I will also, depending on the lighting in the background that I put the character in, I will change the size of the pupil to reflect how dark it is. So for a darker scene, I'm going to put a bigger pupil because our pupils expand in the dark to take in more light. And for a lighter scene, like bright daylight, I will make the pupil so tiny, almost non-existent. Again, it's not super realistic, but I have a very stylized art style, and this is how I like to draw eyes, to make them look as big and colorful as possible. Sometimes with characters with lighter color eyes, like a light blue or a gray, I will actually make the pupil hollow, like so, just so I can make the eye look lighter overall. I'll also do this with characters who are supposed to have glowing eyes because it looks like a little bit of an extra reflection. All right, so now that we have our eye sketched out, the next thing I like to do is eyelashes. These are pretty tricky. For most people, it just takes a lot of time and patience and practice and trying out different techniques until you find one that works for you. My technique is I do a few lashes in a curve off to one side. I will do a few lashes in a curve off to the other side. And then in the middle, if any, I'm just gonna do these very, very, very small lashes, these very small spikes, so that there's just a suggestion of a lash in there. Something like so. And for the bottom lashes, not a lot of people draw bottom lashes. I really like to draw them. I think it makes the eye appear more open. So I do a little heart-shaped lash to start. So 2 lashes kind of coming together at the point to make a heart. I'll do one on the outside, one on the inside, and then as I am going more towards the center of the eye, the lashes are gonna get smaller and smaller and more imperceivable. You'll notice that I made the lashes sort of off the line of the bottom lid, and that is just personal preference of mine. It's kind of supposed to indicate that there's room for the waterline of the eye, which is the part that you put eyeliner on, sort of something like that, but I don't want to draw too many lines because it'll make the piece look really crowded. Generally, after the eyelashes are done, I'm gonna go in with the eyelid. Not all characters are gonna have eyelids, and not all eyelids are going to be the same, but for this character, we're just gonna do a very basic line like this. And again, eyelids are completely dependent on your character. There's not really one standard for them. I, for the most part, try to follow the lash line that I've just drawn, and I will vary the intensity of the eyelid depending on how deep it is. So up in this top part here is going to be a little deeper because it's sinking back into the face. The bottom parts where the skin is coming together more evenly, I'm gonna make those a little bit lighter, so on the edges there. I've just drawn in an eyebrow here, but that's probably a whole nother tutorial in and of itself. So once we have the eye finished, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the line art. I don't really want to get into how to draw the matching eye because there's gonna be a lot of different subtleties and variation when it comes to the perspective of it. If you guys want me to get into that in another video, I'd be happy to do so. But for the line art, everyone has their own line art technique. What I like to do, start on the right layer, first of all. What I like to do is just trace the sketch as best I can. Sometimes I'll find things along the way that I want to change, and I'll change those in the line art layer. I don't usually recommend that. If you're a newer artist, stick to your sketch. It's going to save you so much trouble in the end. And then for the top of the eye here, since there's going to be a lot of like lashes and shadows and a lot of stuff going on at the top of the eye, I just like to make that one solid block and color it in, like so. I've added a couple little like fringes on the end here just to indicate even more eyelashes. I found the trick with eyelashes is to draw as little physical eyelashes as possible, but use a lot of tricks to make the lash line look very full. And now onto the bottom line here. For the bottom lash line, what I like to do is I will trace the sketch layer with a very, very thin line, bringing it up into the upper lash line. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take my eraser and we're just gonna carve out a little bit of the bottom lid here. Just enough so that it is barely erased. Like so. And that's just gonna give the impression of, again, that waterline underneath the eye, the part that you put the eyeliner on, just so that the eyeball is kind of disappearing into that waterline. Now, a lot of people, and I do this sometimes too, but a lot of people really like to draw the tear duct for the character. So what I do to draw the tear duct is I'll just round off this inner corner. So I'm gonna go ahead and just round out this inner corner a little bit and then go in there and erase a little bit of it, kind of abstract looking, so that again it blends into the eye. It's not like overpowering really heavy line art. And then once we're done with that, we're just tracing everything right now, all of our sketch lines, making sure that they all get lined. For the pupil itself, what I like to do, again, use the thinner line art at the bottom and then thicken it out a lot at the top, and that's just to add to the shading of the eye, because the top lid of our eye is going to cast a shadow on the eyeball. So these darker lines at the top here are just to kind of help that shadow along. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the open pupil so that I can show you guys what I mean when I color, how I use the open pupil. All right, and then after the eye is just about finished, I'm going to fill in this little corner right here because it was kind of at an awkward angle. But after we finish the eye, we are once again going to go in with the eyelashes. And what I like to do while following the sketch layer is I will make clumps of lashes. So one right there and then one sort of touching it to the other side to make that kind of empty triangle. And then in addition to the like pairs and clumps of lashes, I'm gonna put single lashes sort of scattered throughout. So again, the eyes look like there's a lot of eyelashes in there, even though we haven't drawn that many. And I said this earlier, but once again, eyelashes are one of those things that you're just gonna have to experiment with until you find a style that you like to do them in. It's very easy to go overboard, and it's very easy to look like there's not enough. Get that crease line in there. Again, trying to make it thicker at the top and thinner towards the edges. You can see I'm already going off the sketch layer here. I do that a lot. I don't recommend it. Do what I say, not what I do. And of course, those bottom lashes. There we are. We've got a lovely little stylized eye. Just gonna finish it off with that eyebrow again. All right, and now that we've finished the line art for the eye, I'm gonna move in with the coloring. I drew this whole sketch of this little person and we're not even using it. So eyes come in a few basic colors if you want to keep them natural. You've got, of course, brown, like my eyes. And brown can be this like very neutral color. It can be a lot darker. It can be almost black, or it could be like a nice sort of honey color. Let's see, we've got brown eyes, we've got green eyes, which again can come in a wide range of colors. Probably not that vibrant naturally, but again, these are very stylized eyes. We've got blue eyes, and we've even got gray eyes. And for gray eyes, what I like to do, I actually like to put a little, just teensy tiny bit of a blue tint on there. This one is our normal gray, and this one is the blue tinted gray. And it just makes it look a lot cooler instead of kind of colorless. Now, we've got the 4 like basic eye colors here. Of course, you can do any color that you want for the eyes depending on your character. I have some characters with purple eyes, I have some characters with like bright orange and yellow eyes, red eyes, whatever you want. There is a color in here, however, that comes with the naturals that I struggle with a lot, and that is hazel eyes. Hazel eyes are kind of a mix between green and blue, which if you put those colors right next to each other, it doesn't look that appealing. So it is quite a struggle to actually make hazel eyes look good stylistically. So I think for this tutorial, we're gonna go ahead and just do the blue eyes on this character because I feel like that's gonna give you the most accurate representation of how I draw eyes. And then we'll do another eye in the hazel colors to show you how I kind of struggle with hazel eyes and how I managed to make characters with hazel eyes still look good. Don't get me wrong, I think hazel is a gorgeous eye color. I wish I had hazel eyes. It's just very difficult to draw. First of all, I'm just gonna draw like a basic skin tone for this character. Nothing super fancy, but I do want it to look like the eye is not just floating in space. And then for the eye, what I do here, so this background is white, all right? This background that we have right here, I use just the very slightest off-white gray color. This is what I'll generally use. I also have another color that's more of like a pinky gray. Those are the 2 eyeball colors that I use. Those are for the whites of the eye, the sclera, if you will. So for this one, we're just gonna use the very light gray color. And the reason I make it a very light gray is so that when I get to the point of doing the highlights actually stand out more and you can see them against the white part of the eye. And once it's next to the skin tone, you really cannot tell that it's a different color from this one right here. So we've got the white of the eye. I also like to draw in the tear duct on the same layer, and that's just a very muted, a little bit darker pink. And then I'm gonna take a new layer. What I like to do on the color wheel, let's move this window capture over a little bit just so you guys can see what I'm doing here. So for eyes in general, what I like to do is I use 2 different tones to color the eyes initially, and then we move on to the shading and highlighting after that. But for the initial color, what I really like to do is I will take the lighter color and I will make it as warm as possible. So we're gonna have 2 different colors here, a light one and a dark one, and the lighter one is going to be really warm. So we're gonna take this blue and we're gonna move it towards the green because it's moving up towards this yellow color, which is of course a warm color. We're gonna move it towards the green as much as possible while still keeping it blue. Once I'm satisfied with that color, we're gonna do some really unnatural blue eyes here just to show you how this technique can work. Once I'm satisfied with that color, I'm gonna go in and color just the iris, fill that in. And then I'm gonna take another layer on top of that, and that's gonna be our eye gradient layer. I'm gonna clip it to the iris color, which just means that the blue that I have just put down is influencing the color that I'm about to put down. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. And then I'm gonna take this really warm teal blue and I'm gonna move it towards a cooler area. I don't like to go too far from where I started. For example, I don't wanna go all the way into the purple, but I am gonna go right into this very true blue portion of the color wheel. Basically, we want to make it as cool as we can. So once we have that blue color, we're going to take it from the really light, really saturated color, and we're just going to bring it down into the darker area. We don't want to go too low because we don't want black, but we definitely want it to be significantly darker than the color we just put down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a soft brush or an airbrush, and I'm just going to very carefully kind of outline what we've just done so that there's a nice haze around the outside of the iris, just like so. And you can see here, once I've clipped it, you can kind of see that there are some areas that I missed with the original light color. We can definitely go back and fix those later. But once we've got this nice sort of hazy ring around the iris here, I'm gonna go in and add a little bit of detail. And the way that I do this is I just very, very carefully do kind of like a horseshoe shape around the eye. Just like that. Very, very light on the ends and heavier towards the top. I'm even gonna go in here and kind of lighten these ends up a little bit. So once we've got that horseshoe shape down, I'm gonna go ahead and increase my brush size. And then we're just going to do a nice soft gradient from the top. Bring that down. And then the final step is to decrease the brush size until you're right about the size of the pupil and just color in that pupil a little bit. So now this eye is nicely colored in. Here's something I like to do when I make the eyes glow for like my vampire and werewolf and otherworldly characters, is I will actually go in and erase the darker part of the pupil. And this, combined with some like lighting techniques, really makes the character look like they have bright glowing eyes, kind of like vampiric or otherworldly. So now that we've finished the shading on that, we're gonna take our original color and just kind of clean up the lines here on the original base layer of the eye, the one that we clipped the blue to. Here we are. Beautiful. Alrighty, so now that we've got the basic colors done, I'm gonna go ahead and keep that glowing eye, because why not? But once we've got the basic colors done, what I'm gonna do here, see my layers over here? I'm gonna take, let me label these real quick so you can actually see what I'm doing. So now once we've got the eye colored in, I'm gonna go ahead and take all of my colored layers. So that's gonna be the eye gradient, which is the darker part here, the iris, the eyeball, and the skin. I'm gonna take all of those and put them in a folder. And then I'm gonna take another layer right above that folder, clip it to the folder that I've just created, set the blending mode to multiply right here. And now this is going to be our cell shading layer. You can kind of see it here. I've got a few shading colors over here, depending on the mood that my drawing has. I've got some warmer colors down in the pinks, and I've got some darker colors up in the sort of blue range. I'm gonna go ahead and use this middle purple color. And what we're gonna do is, once this is set to multiply, it actually just creates a shading layer for you. So the first shaded part we're gonna do is directly under the eyelid here. Don't be afraid to make this really thick. Some people I've seen, they go all the way down here and that is their shading layer. I like to bring it a little higher than that because I don't like to block off too much of the eye, but don't be afraid to make it larger than like just a little strip up there, because that's gonna make it look very flat. You do want it to have a little bit of dimension. And I'm not gonna go into the cell shading too much, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do a little bit of shading where I feel necessary. If you guys want a shading tutorial, I would be happy to make that for you. Something I will do though, is I'm gonna go ahead and on the skin layer, this is how you soft shade around an eye, or at least the best way that I've found. We're gonna clip another multiply layer to the skin layer, and using that same purple color, I'm gonna take a soft brush, really, really big here. There we go, about as big as like the eye socket, so everything underneath the eyebrow. And we're just gonna do a little bit of shading right on the inner corner here. And this is really, really great for actually helping develop the bridge of the nose. So this is this inner corner right here. Once we've finished with that shading, we're gonna decrease the size of our brush and just erase everything right around the eye here. And that sort of makes the lid stand out a bit. It highlights the inner corner there very nicely, and it just makes everything look a little bit more 3D. I've actually made this shading a little bit too dark, so I'm just gonna do a quick swipe to lighten it up a bit. There we are. And you can do this soft shading sort of inside the eye as well. I like to bring it just around the outside corners here. There's really nothing else that needs to be shaded. You don't really want to get too detailed with shading the eye because it is such a small, very detailed area that it's going to kind of take away from the focus a little bit. All right, so once we have everything shaded, I'm gonna go ahead and go in doing a highlight layer. How I'm gonna do that, this is very complicated. I will go to a more in-depth tutorial on this if you guys want me to, but for the time being, I've created a new layer above my cell shading layer. And this new layer is going to be the highlight. So once we have the highlight layer, we're actually not gonna clip that one just yet. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this color folder right here. I gotta remember to label these. and we're gonna duplicate the color layer and have it sit right above the highlight layer that we just created. Go ahead and merge that duplicated layer you just created and then clip that to the highlight layer. Very complicated. I will go more in depth if you guys want me to. But basically what this does is you are now highlighting with the colors you already have. So we're gonna take that highlight layer, change the blending mode to screen, and that is going to give you a lovely little highlight layer. I'm deciding that I want the light source to be sort of up in this area, so keeping in mind, again, that cone that we created with the iris, it's actually going to be the far side of the cone that is going to be highlighted because the light is going to be bouncing off the inside rather than bouncing off of a flat surface. So with that in mind, what I'm gonna do with my soft brush here is I'm just going to make little tiny highlighted areas. It's hard to see because I did make the color of the eye itself extremely saturated. So what I'm actually gonna do, I'm gonna color adjust the iris, make it a little less saturated and ever so slightly darker. That way the highlight shows up again. And there you are, you've got the nice little highlights in there, just little random dots and streaks kind of pointing towards the pupil of the eye. And then another area I like to highlight is just right on the inner corner here, right where that tear duct is, and the waterline. And then the final step here is everyone's favorite. It is what I call the glitter layer, but it's basically just like the really shiny highlights inside of an eye, the reflective part. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a layer and put it above the line art layer. This is gonna be above everything. We're gonna set the blending mode to shine. I believe in Photoshop, the blending mode is called add, but it does the same thing. And then I'm just gonna take pure white. The blending mode is really just to help it look a little bit more illuminated, but I'm just taking a pure white color for this, and we're going to draw in just a nice little simple highlight. Here we are. Depending on your character and your setting, you can stop at 1. I like to add a couple little more, so I'll add one on the opposite side of the pupil here, and then maybe just one off to the side as well. And that, my good friends, is how you draw an eye. Now what I wanna do with this eye is I'm actually gonna go back and change the colors out. I want to try and do a bit of a hazel eye for you. Instead of coloring it in, I'm just gonna go ahead and color adjust it. So I'm just gonna take away the highlighting for a second, and we're gonna take that iris, color adjust, and the way that I found to make hazel eyes really work, let's shift this over again so you can see my colors one more time. So the way that I have found that kind of makes hazel eyes work, we've got 2 different colors for hazel, right? We've got brown and we've got green. The green, of course, is going to be in this area of the color wheel over here. The brown is actually going to be a dark orange. So even though the green is technically the cooler color because it is more towards the bottom of the color wheel than the oranges, I have found that it actually works a lot better if I use green for the lighter color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and color adjust this iris that we have, find green on there, and we're gonna make it as yellow as possible, just so it kind of like blends in with the brown that we're gonna put in later. There we are. And then we're gonna color adjust the darker color, and this one is gonna be brown. So first let's go ahead and find a nice orange. That's pretty good. And then I'm just gonna deepen that orange a bit so that we get a good brown. Take the saturation down a little bit, and there we are. And then the last step that I like to do for hazel eyes in particular is I'm creating a new layer underneath the brown gradient layer, and I'm actually gonna go in with a very like goldenrod color almost. And we're just gonna do just ever so slightly the smallest little gradient of that goldenrod color. And we're just gonna do ever so slightly the just smallest gradient of that goldenrod color, kind of right where the shading would be, just right there. This isn't a completely necessary step. It did look fine without it, but I think it helps the green and brown blend a lot better since they are not right next to each other. There we are. That is how I draw eyes. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this from me. I really enjoyed this kind of format where I'm talking to you as I'm drawing. If you want to follow me on my socials, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. I'm now streaming live on Twitch. And if you want to support me a little bit extra, you can find me on Patreon. All of those are under Threadwing. Your support means the world to me on all of those platforms. And make sure you guys subscribe to this channel so you can find your way back for next week's video. I love you all so much. I will see you next week. Bye!